I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing my ranking of every Elden Ring boss ever via their regions, as I take a 2-minute elevator to the underground. This video will encompass any bosses that are found in the 3 major underground areas: Siofra River and by extension Mohgwyn Palace, Ainsel River and by extension the Lake of Rot and Estelle, and the Deeproot Depths. Bosses simply need an official health bar to count, so let's jump right in. All 12 underground Elden Ring bosses, ranked. Let me know your favorites down below. At number 12, we have the Dragonkin Soldier found in the Lake of Rot. This is, without a doubt, my least favorite boss fight in Elden Ring. So what a way to start the video, eh? Fought in the center of the Lake of Rot, to even activate and raise the platforms needed to fairly fight this boss, you have to willingly get Scarlet Rot to reach the lever in the first place. Then the actual fight sees you trying to dodge and block his attacks on a very small platform while he attempts to knock you into the rot so you can get afflicted by it. A stark reminder that should I fall in, a timer of impending doom will go off thanks to that scarlet poison. His damage output is extremely high, and unlike the other 2 Dragonkin soldiers we'll talk about later in the video, I just didn't have the space I'd wanted to handle his moveset. I'm glad we have a stake of Marika, as trudging across the lake after every death would actually begin my insanity arc, but who thought plopping this man down here was a good idea? His moveset doesn't work for the arena or the area. Even more insulting when you realize he drops the Dragon Scale Blade, the only katana in the game that doesn't deal passive status buildups like bleed or poison. And its main feature is dealing 20% extra damage against dragons and 10% against ancient dragons, except almost all of its moveset is slash damage, which dragons are resistant to. An absolute joke of a weapon. I died 7 times to this Dragonkin soldier, changing up my build, switching out talismans, and even when I won, I didn't feel like I overcame a tough boss. I felt like I'd lucked out against some real bullshit. Take this boss away, and nothing in Elden Ring changes. In fact, how about we just take the Lake of Rot away instead, huh? At number 11, we have the Valiant Gargoyles found in the Siofra Aqueduct. Oh look, it's my second least favorite fight in Elden Ring. The underground is really hitting those low lows to start with. I've gone on record before talking about how bad I feel the Valiant Gargoyles are as a gank fight. In fact, I believe they are the worst gank fight in the series. You can see my video on the top 10 worst gank fights in Soulsborne for more information, but the problem is that their movesets just do not complement each other in the slightest. We have 2 gargoyles who are both happy to be aggressive and active at the same time, leaving the player with no real room to breathe. And if you do happen to breathe in, you'll be inhaling a host of hard-to-see poison spores that the gargoyles like to fire at you in their off time. It feels like they tried to recapture the fun of the Demon Prince gank from Dark Souls 3, down to a series of similar moves, but completely botched it with the poison that outright staggers you if you're caught in it. It's such a shame, as I love the gargoyle fights in past games, and I think it's one of From Software's more fun tropes they like to reuse. But this pair just don't work. Swap out the poison for actual ranged attacks, similar to how the original Bell Gargoyles used Fire Breath, and maybe the fight would be bearable. They drop the Gargoyle's Greatsword and the Gargoyle's Twin Blade upon defeat, their signature weapons, so at least you're getting something good out of slaying them. But if you want to reach the Deeproot Depths and you just can't be arsed facing this pair, take the hidden path through Lanedell instead, it'll serve you just fine. At number 10, we have Fier's Champions found in the Deeproot Depths. Oh look, it's my 5th least favourite boss fight in Elden Ring. Wow! Honestly though, at least Fier's Champions can make the claim that they're trying something unique, even if in my case it didn't really go anywhere. You face 3 waves of NPC invasions, the first being a random champion, the second being Sorcerer Roger, the third being Lionel the Lionheart and 2 more random champions. Now I say random because if you play online, those 3 extra NPCs will be based on player builds. Every time Fia gave a hug, she was secretly stealing your data, but you can protect yourself with NordVPN. I'm kidding, but if there are any sponsors out there, my business email is in the description. That being said, taking on the offline version of Fia's champions, which is what I did because I don't pay for PS Plus, is still a tough time. Specifically, the 3rd wave where you're balancing 3 different enemies who are all fairly aggressive and do a ton of damage. Slaying them all ultimately wins you the fight, but I found it surprisingly hard despite their mediocre health. Didn't die to them once though. Defeating the champions gets you Fia's Mist, a sorcery that is designed for PvP because its Death Blight Mist only affects other Tarnished, and thus I give 0 fucks about it. How disappointing. At number 9, we have the Dragonkin Soldier found in Siofra River, an optional encounter that's incredibly hard to find as he's only accessible through a single waygate. I found that when I fought him, he was hitting surprisingly hard. He's tough, one that I sense you're not intended to fight on your first visit to the river. On my original playthrough, I found the Noxtella Dragonkin Soldier first, but in this playthrough, this was my first Dragonkin Soldier, and I can't decide whether it's better or worse to find this guy out of order, as this Dragonkin Soldier, alongside the Lake of Rot variant, don't have access to the Phase 2 that the Noxtella variant has, which makes their fights objectively inferior. And yet this guy is in such a cool location, this sprawling lake, waterfalls nearby, high atop the ruins of Nokron. It's probably the most mid-fight on today's list, but that's not really a bad thing. The jump from Fia's champions to this Dragonkin Soldier is like night and day. Dodge some simple attacks, use Torrent if you feel like it, have fun. He drops the Dragon Halberd upon defeat, which is a great early game weapon, though the scaling drops off the further in you go, which feels at odds with when it feels like you're meant to fight this boss, but that's just me. At number 8, we have Crucible Knight Siluria, found in the Deeproot Depths. I don't know if it's just me, but I found this encounter to be so random in comparison to most bosses in the game. I was just looking around Deeproot Depths, jumping up a Spirit Spring with Torrent, and suddenly Crucible Knight boss fight. Except it's nothing really special. Siluria may be one of the only 2 named Crucible Knights in the game, but they still use the spear moveset we're used to at this point. I already handled this exact set of attacks in the dual Crucible Knight boss fight outside Lanedell. Hell, I fought a spear-wielding Crucible Knight in the aqueducts we traveled through to even reach the Deeproot Depths. Siluria doesn't do anything special or different with their moves, not one unique skill, and of the 2 variants of Crucible Knights, the spear is the easier to dodge and has more punishable special attacks. It gets a boost to 8th place on this list purely because Crucible Knights are fun to fight, but we're so late in the game by the time we arrive that I need something unique to make this fight stand out. Defeating Siluria gets you their great spear, Siluria's Tree, which has a solid Ash of War that can be used to snipe enemies from afar, and it's got a wide hitbox too, so you're more likely to hit even with a slow startup. Solid reward for a fairly standard fight overall, don't know why it needed to be a boss fight. At number 7, we have the Mimic Tear found in Nokron Eternal City. I've sung this boss's praises many times in the past, because I really do feel the Mimic Tear is great in concept with a lot of potential, but is hampered by the admittedly unavoidable issues that come with an AI using a player build. If you choose to cheese the Mimic Tear and unequip all your clothing before entering the fight, that's a totally fair strategy. You can break the fight and have an extremely simple experience. But I can't help feeling that people who do that are purposefully missing out on the fun of the battle. There's often this desire to optimize everything, and fights are only good if you can learn and get through them quickly and efficiently. For me, anytime I face the Mimic Tear, I do hold back a bit, but because I want to. The AI deserves a chance to try and flex itself, and sometimes they use my build better than I would, teaching me new things to try out after the fight. Defeating it gets you some larval tears for respeccing your character, and the Silver Tear Mask, an armor piece that heavily boosts your arcane stat while lowering your physical attack. It's a nice trade-off, and armor that benefits certain types of builds. I look forward to the Mimic tier every time I head to Nokron, and I think you guys should too. Man, that was a rough patch at the start of this video there, and if you want to help me out of my rough patch, we're trying to reach 35,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and 100,000 subscribers as my overall channel goal. So if you want to help out, be sure to parry that subscribe button so you stay up to date on all my future content, or consider going the extra mile and become a channel member. It is $4.99 a month, it gets you early 24-hour access to future videos, a shout out in the description and at the end of each video as well. Thank you so much, and back to the list. Next up at number 6 and 5, we have the Ancestor Spirit bosses. Since they're next to each other on the ranking, I figured I'd keep them in the same entry on the video because their fights are mechanically exactly the same, but the order might surprise you. At number 6, we have the Regal Ancestor Spirit, which you fight after lighting all the torches in Upper Nokron. While I adore both of these fights for the pure ambience and atmosphere they deliver, I find the Regal Ancestor Spirit to be a little more on the frustrating side due to his healing mechanic. I recall watching my partner play this fight, and his damage was good, but the boss would constantly heal at low health, negating the progress made in the fight. Some of its unique attacks are fun to avoid though, especially the goat roll where it tries to sonic spin dash you. These aren't hard fights, far from it, but the energy they give is just something else, man. This boss drops the remembrance of the Regal Ancestor, which can be used to collect either a unique talisman or a special weapon. But at number 5, we have the Ancestor Spirit you find on your first visit to Siofra River. This boss just hits differently compared to the Regal variant because it's the first one I encountered. When two bosses are that similar, even with the Regal Ancestor Spirit having a more fleshed out moveset, I still have to give the nostalgic nod to the basic bitch that came before. Ancestor Spirit is haunting, a fight that has a lot of good lore behind it that your player couldn't possibly comprehend. You're slaying these gods that once ruled the land and are now mere spirits from a civilization long gone by. And that music, oh my god, that music encompasses the theme of nature perfectly. They drop the ancestral follower ashes, allowing you too to have a 360-degree no-scope summon at your disposal. Put this guy in the corner of any boss fight and you have got guaranteed chances of the boss becoming a pincushion before the day is out. Two incredibly fun and atmospheric fights, deserving of a high spot on today's list, even if they're not the most mechanically engaging battles in the game. At number 4, we have the Dragonkin Soldier of Nokstella, found at the end of Ainsel River. I was very happy that on my first playthrough, this was the Dragonkin fight I discovered first, because in a similar way to Magma Worm Makar, the Dragonkin Soldier of Nokstella ends up being the peak of his boss line. He has all the same slams and swipes as the regular Dragonkin soldiers, but is further enhanced with his own enraged state. At 60% health, he creates a lightning explosion that powers up all his future attacks with frozen lightning, and this is an effect that can cause frostbite buildup and can be very hard to deal with. He does get a bit more flighty than I'd like, jumping away from the player because most of his deadly attacks are used at range. His AI feels like it's designed to get as far away from the Tarnished as possible while raining down lightning from the heavens. But it's a great fight. In my Elden Ring boss ranking last year, I think I undersold the quality of this fight, and even though it's not in my top 20 or anything, it's an all-around fun surprise to find at the end of one of the creepiest underground cavern areas in the game. Defeating this boss gets you the Frozen Lightning Spear incantation, which creates a large cone of frozen lightning ahead of the strike zone. Pretty good for enemies directly ahead of you, but I think there are other incantations that fill the same niche. That being said, the jump from this number 4 entry to our top 3 is exponential to say the least. At number 3, we have Estelle, Natural Born of the Void, found in the depths of Liurnia past the Grand Cloister. This enigmatic creature from space crash-landed into the lands between long before we arrive, destroying the sky of Nokstella and ultimately resting itself in its secluded cavern. This is the first real creature in the game that made me think about the potential of beings beyond the cosmos from space itself. So far, Elden Ring had been quite a medieval experience, and Estelle was there to remind us that FromSoft really loves their Lovecraft and their space. His fight is a little on the easy side, what with his fairly telegraphed melee attacks when you get in close. His grab can be dangerous to avoid, people struggle with that, and if you can't recall the timing of his beams, he can snipe you early into the fight. He also has some of the most powerful gravity magic in the game. His ever-expanding AoE attacks caught me off guard a lot, and his gravity attack that lifts you into the air is a classic if I've ever seen one. But his ace in the hole is his Meteorite of Estelle, a deadly attack that causes a shower of meteors to litter the arena. And this has killed me before. It's far more accurate than the Meteorite spell from the Onyx Lords, and that reflects in how tough it is to dodge. You have to stay close to Estelle, anticipate his teleports, and don't let him get the better of you. He's a main boss, which means he drops his Remembrance, allowing you to either get the Bastard Star's Flail or the Ash of War Waves of Darkness. I haven't dabbled in either, but boss weapons and skills are almost always a great time at this point in the game. Estelle is fabulous, but I admittedly think he's a tad underwhelming on repeat runs, and there are many moments where you can catch his AI when he's surprisingly non-aggressive. You don't really have that issue with my top two. At number 2, we have Lich Dragon Fortisax, the secret hidden boss of the Deeproot Depths. Immediately, this is one of the best dragon fights in the game, with an amazing arena that stands out among the rest. The skybox is an insane artistic expression of chaos. The music is absolute god tier with the organ and the vocals and the tempo, all combined with one of the most threatening dragon designs in the game. Fortisax is the brother of Lanciax, who we ranked in the last Elden Ring region video for Altus, which means he's an ancient dragon. The neon red electricity is a telltale sign, but it works so amazingly here because that bright red is in stark contrast with the darkened scales of the blighted dragon and its purple and grey arena. Fortisax took on the burden of Deathblight to try and save his former friend Godwyn, but we're here to slay him, allowing Godwyn to take on a whole new meaning. It's very tragic. While I don't really like the Deathblight being used in the fight, I will admit with a lot of hindsight that it is very easy to actually avoid Fortisax's deadly smoke. I just suck at spatial awareness when I'm fighting something on the first, second, or third attempt. Fortisax has some of the most cinematic attacks in the game, such as his own glaive attack similar to his sister, as well as his signature Fortisax's Lightning, where he creates 2 bolts and slams them down to the ground. The impact does damage, as does the outgoing AoE, which you have to avoid if you want to punish the attack in the first place. Fortisax just has so much character, but is only really let down by a surprisingly mediocre health pool, 12,983. It sounds like a lot, but compared to other endgame fights, it doesn't stack up in the slightest. Fortisax deserved to feel like an endgame opponent, not a mid-game one. You get his Remembrance upon defeat, which allows you to either obtain the Fortisax Lightning Spear or the Death Lightning incantations. Lightning Spear lets you use his signature attack, which is one of my favorite animations in the game, while Death Lightning is fucking useless. You can't Deathblight enemies, what's the point in using the spell? Lightning Spear all the way, baby. At number 1, we have Mohg, Lord of Blood, found in Mohgwyn Palace. Last year, I called Mohg my 3rd favourite Elden Ring boss. I've changed my mind about that, for he is now, as of this moment, tied alongside Morgott as my favourite Elden Ring boss. Mohg is a classic FromSoft fight through and through, a hidden endgame battle that sees the player taking on one of the toughest demigods, and his fight is about to take new meaning once the DLC launches, as he becomes a required boss alongside Radahn to access Shadow of the Erdtree through Miquella's cocoon. His first phase is all about learning his attacks and countering them appropriately. His ability to build up bleed is a big threat, but as I've learned over the years, there are always ways to counter most of Mohg's abilities, even if it's just learning correct positioning or ensuring he uses specific moves. The biggest critique of this fight is his Nihil, as the only way to counter it without losing countless healing charges is to use the Purifying Crystal tier buff you get from Eleonora. This is an optional item that many players won't find, and I can get the frustration in that sense. It's not something everyone will love. My boyfriend actually hated Mohg on his playthrough, for example, but he clicks with me. I love the way he grows darkened black wings and flies into the sky, creating an oppressive atmosphere that forces you to keep track of your positioning, his positioning, and the arena itself so you're not backed into a corner. Him being able to heal mid-fight through Nihil also allows his phase 2 more time to shine, as long as you're not using an OP build designed to melt him in less than a minute. His fight can be frustrating, it's hard to learn, but compared to something like Malenia, where I never feel like I'm making progress due to her lifesteal, Mohg is the opposite. I always feel like I'm making progress with him, and that's just so satisfying. Defeating him gets you his remembrance, allowing you to either craft his Mohgwyn Sacred Spear, which is a weapon I'd really love to try at some point, as well as Blood Boon, an incantation that allows you to spread blood flames by ripping them from the Formless Mother. His Great Rune is nothing to write home about, sadly, as it's a purely PvP-focused mechanic. Nothing I'll ever dabble in, but if that's your thing, you already know what his rune does. Mohg is fabulous, he's the toxic LGBTQIA+ rep we didn't know we needed. I can fix him, but I'll let him keep his fire music though. And that's my list. Which underground boss is your favourite? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. My social medias are on screen now, feel free to follow me if you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter or my Discord. My Twitter is definitely the best place to go, or my YouTube community tab. Keep an eye on that, always a good way to go too. Shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. Thank you guys so much, you are amazing, and I will see you all in the next video. Adios!